My name is Cecilia, and I'm an alcoholic. And I've been blessed with the gift of sobriety since July 1st of 2015. And I call it a gift because it truly is a gift. And each day I want to hold on to it and never give it back to a God of my understanding who blessed me with this gift. I got a little emotional looking at all you ladies in the back because that's where it started for me. I sat where you sat in June of 2015, and I never thought when I sat in that chair that my life would be where it's at today. And my life is a total miracle today. And it is because of this program and a higher power that I choose to call God. So you stay where you're at, and I hope you get it. And when you get it, don't let it go, because we're not all promised this gift. And to be in these rooms today is a gift that we want to hold on to. I want to thank Kenny Matt for asking me to the Solutions group to carry the message of hope. Thank you for having me in your group. I qualify to stand behind here and tell you my story. With that being said, I have a sponsor. My sponsor has 32 years. I have a grand sponsor who has 45 years. And I stick with the winners in this program because I want to stay well and I want to be able to continue living a life of happiness, freedom, and joy, just like the book will say. And I have a home group. My home group is Serenity in Midland, Texas. Midland is where I live. Fort Worth is where I was born and raised, and that's where I did all my dirt at. It's one of the many counties that I fell out of, including Midland County. I sponsor women. I pass on the 12th step because that's what we're taught. All this that I've learned today is from my experience, strength, and hope, and it's from my blueprint that I call the first 164 pages. Anything past the first 64 is just what I like to refer to as a pearl in the book. Because the solution and the outline of a spiritual program is found in the first 164. And that is where I built my foundation. That is where I went through the book. And that is what keeps me free today and a God of my understanding. And I'm grateful. Man, I'm so grateful. You know, when Kenny asked me a month ago if I could speak, you know, the first thought wrong, right? Come on, it's the day before New Year's Eve, you know. But then I sat there and I said, what a great way to end the year. What a great way to reflect on what this program has done for me and continues to do for me and my family. And the women that God has brought me this year to take through the work and to hold their hand, because there's no ownership in sponsorship. It's just like the book says, we walk hand in hand with our man, that they may find what we have found. I don't get to take credit for what they find, and I don't get to take credit if they don't find it. I just get to pass on this gift that I found only through my experience, strength, and hope, and that is what I'm going to share with you tonight. When I say alcoholic, it sums up everything. I don't got to stand behind here and tell you that I was a woman that did all sorts of things, because in the doctor's opinion, where it says we believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. And then it goes on to say that these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form. Well, I'm here to tell you that I've tried every form that you can possibly think of. But I stand behind here. I work the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it sums it up because I have a disease of the mind, and that is where my problem centers, and that's where it continues to rest for me. And believe me, it will rest if I don't treat it. And then one day I will find it. I will find a way to treat it. And I will tell you, there's two ways that I'm going to treat this disease that I live with. I'm going to treat it with drugs and alcohol, or I'm going to treat it with a program of recovery. And drugs and alcohol just does not work for me anymore. And I discovered that in 2015. In 2015 is when I really just spiraled out of control. And just to back up a little bit, in 2008, in October of 2008, I was discharged from TDC. I had served a 2-year sentence, and they made me do all my time because I have a wonderful background with lots of felonies. And every time I went down, I took about 2 or 3 with them, and I've been down 4 times. So you do the math. But In 2006 is when the judge wasn't playing with me no more. And I used to live my life always on the run. There wasn't a time when I wasn't wanted from the police. And my attitude was I didn't care. I didn't care what you thought. I didn't care what they thought. I didn't care. I used to live a really gangster life. I come from a very gangster family. My mom just got out of prison last year. I got a brother serving life in prison, and I got lots of uncles doing time. That was my upbringing. I was raised around alcohol, drugs, and crime, and that's all I knew. I took my first hit of dope with my own mama, and I used to commit crimes with my own mom. That's the type of environment that I was brought into. And it was just a matter of time until I became just like them. I get to share this gift of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous with my dad today. He has 26 years of sobriety. He is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and his group is the Southwest group in Fort Worth. And the gift is we get to share this today. My mom, right now, I had to do what's best for my sobriety, and she's where she's at, and all I can do is save her a seat, because that's what we're taught, is we save a seat for the ones that just haven't got it yet. So in 2006, I was on the run, and, I was out there just doing the deal and just running around with the type of people that I used to like to run around with. If they weren't bald, tatted out, and fresh out of prison, I didn't want nothing to do with them. And if they're bald, tatted out, and fresh out of prison, well, they're affiliated, they have power, they have dope, and they have money, and that's the way I used to like them. And that's why I always stayed in trouble. I see some of y'all shaking y'all's head back there. You get it, right? You get it until it doesn't work anymore. Until it doesn't work. And I had 2 kids at that time, and I couldn't stay sober. I couldn't be there for them. And I used to have this thought that, well, my kids were clean and I did everything for them, and I was a good mom, but I wasn't, because all the clothes that they wore were stolen. And everything that I did for them was illegal. And the main thing that they needed me to do, I couldn't do. And that was to really love them and be a mother to them. And so there was times in my life where my kids had to go with my mom and my kids had to go with family members because I was incapable of being a mother to them. And in 2006, my kids at that time had been placed with CPS because I knew I was on the run and I was going to go do some time. And I couldn't stay sober. So I ended up having a car wreck and woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. And you see, waking up handcuffed to hospital beds was part of my story. There have been many times when I'd wake up in a paper dress where I, lost it. Or there had been times when I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed because I had overdosed or somebody with me didn't make it. That's part of my story too. But this particular time that I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed, I woke up to them stitching my eye up. And sheriff standing over me, and it was becoming a normal in my life. Those type of situations were normal for me. And it just didn't really faze me. I would always find a way to get myself out of that. Or my mentality was, oh, well, I'll go do 8 months. I'll go do 7 months. I'll be out again, and then just do right back the same thing that got me there. Would literally get drunk and high the day of getting out, celebrating me being home. Not understanding this physical allergy that lived within me. And so that particular day, I remember coming to in a hospital bed, and the nurse, giving me this beautiful smile, a disgusted smile. You have a felony warrant for your arrest and you're pregnant. And man, you want to talk about shame. You're looking at a woman that's been in some situations that were so shameful. Getting arrested, getting walked out of department stores, always being shackled, standing before a judge, you name it, man, I've been there. And so it was like, man, and the one thing I could never do was stay out of trouble. And so I knew this time, I said, well, they weren't going to let me out this time. And I had no bond and I was pregnant. And here I was in a situation where, they were sentencing me to TDC and I didn't have no one to come get the baby. And the truth is I thought it was his, but then I didn't know if it was his, because that's the type of life that I would, that's just the way I was running. And so baby didn't have a daddy. You know, his daddy could have been him, and it could have been him. And, you know, and the truth is both of those coulda, woulda beens were addicts just like me. And so I end up going to do time, and, you know, lo and behold, I find out I'm not the only woman in prison that doesn't have anybody to come get their baby. But, you know, one thing that I always look back on my life is that God never left me. And I'm going to talk about God, just like the way this book talks about God. And if it offends you, you take what you need and you leave the rest. But God is part of my story. And he never left me. Those nights where I would drive drunk and I would drive high and I would put my kids in situations and I would come to and I would overdose. He was right there with me. And at this particular time when I was in a dorm with other women that were just like me, and some of them were on their deathbed and some of them were never going to see the day to lie or whatever it was, the lady sleeping next to me was in the same situation. And you see, my mother was in prison. When I'm in my addiction, I cut everybody out of my life. I don't see people. I don't want to see you. I don't know how to have relationships. I just know how to run. You see, and we'll talk about where it talks about in the 3rd step promises in a minute, where we get to face life successfully today. But I didn't know how to face life in my addiction and my alcoholism. And this lady had told me that she didn't have nobody to come get her baby either. And there was a lady out of Houston, Texas, that ran a baby ministry. And her purpose of her ministry was to help women not lose their babies that were incarcerated. And God sent me her. And that was probably one of the hardest things I had to endure in my life, was to have a baby in prison. The next thing hardest to that was I didn't get to see my other 2 kids because they were both in different places, and the family members that were caring for them just didn't have the means to come bring them to see me. And the truth is everybody was tired of my crap, because the way my life looked is I would go do 6 months, I'd come home for 6 months, I'd go back in and do 7 months, I'd come home for about 6 months, I'd go back and do 8 months, I'd come home for 6 months, and then I'd go back and do another 2 years, and here I am now, right? By the grace of God, I haven't touched the grounds of TDC for over 16 years now. But I've had my dance around with the law. So I have the baby in prison, and Mrs. Pastor Julie Gabbard, agrees to come get him. And that was beautiful. And the whole time there, she brings him once a month to see me, and she does kind things like put money on my books and sends me pictures and she helps to keep that connection. And I remember in my heart, and many times, and all those bottoms, there's always been a place in my heart where it was like, God, this is it. I don't want to do this no more. This is going to be the last time I drink. This is going to be the last time I steal. This is going to be the last time I do this. And in my heart, I meant it. Just like what I felt in prison when I felt having that baby, I said, when I go home, I'm never going to take a drink. Because for drinking for me leads to the drugs, and then the drugs leads right back down the road, and then that leads to that criminal thinking, and that criminal thinking leads to that criminal behavior, and I'm off and running one more time. That's how it works for me. I can't drink without drugging, and I can't drug without drinking. They go real well they're probably not well, but they pair up in my life, and that's what I felt. That's alcoholism. It lives in your heart, but there's something else up here. And I'm here to tell you, Alcoholics Anonymous, I vowed to myself that I was never going to take another drink, never going to take another drug, because of what I felt in that prison and what I had to go through. And that 10 minutes of holding my baby just to be yanked away and never to get to hold him again until he was 10 months old is when I finally got to see him one more time. And I felt it that I was never going to do it. And I remember looking back how the pastor would send me things like, we have a family that wants to adopt your baby. And I'm like, no, don't you ever ask me that again. That's my baby. I had every intention of coming home, getting my other 2 kids, and raising my son. I did. I had every intention. I had all these great successful ideas that, I would never do that again, and I can do this. But you see, when I got let out of prison in October of 2008, I went right back to the same stomping grounds in Fort Worth, and it's my grandmother's house, and it's right there in the hood. And that's, I didn't have to travel far to look for the drugs and the alcohol. It was within the home. It was right there within the home. And before I got locked up, I was addicted to heroin. And And so, you know, I kind of had my experience where I wasn't going to do that again. And is what I told myself. And so I decided that a 24-ounce Bud Light didn't sound so bad. And it started with a 24-ounce Bud Light. And that 24-ounce Bud Light led to some meth. And before you know it, you know, I was slowly going right back to what led me to prison. Well, my husband that I've been with for over 20 years, and within that 20 years, we've had incarceration, separation, and there's been all sorts of other things. He had moved to Midland with our son, and they were, you know, he was trying to get away from the same life too. And so I eventually followed them to Midland. I came to Midland on a Greyhound bus with a plastic tub of hand-me-down clothes and didn't own anything because every time I got locked up, I lost everything I owned, and I just didn't have anything, you know. And I left my oldest daughter back in Fort Worth because her aunt wouldn't give her back to me, and I was going to have to prove myself if I wanted my daughter back. So I came to Midland with the intention of doing things differently, not realizing that where I go, there I am. And thinking Fort Worth's the problem, my family's the problem, I got to get away from there, I know too many people. And lo and behold, I bring the trouble to Midland. And so I come to Midland, and, you know, it's what I know today is I'm just dry with all these behaviors. I'm still stealing. I'm probably not using heroin, probably not using meth yet, snorting a little cocaine here, drinking here. And you know, but I'm not as bad as I was before I went to prison. And so, you know, that's my comparison right there. But before you know it, it just starts getting real bad. It gets real bad. And to the point to where I have to make a decision. I'm not going to be able to get that little boy back. I've already lost hope. So I made a decision to give up my son to a very loving couple out of Tyler, Texas that couldn't have children. And what I know today is that God only used me as a vessel to give them a baby. And it was an open adoption. And looking back now, God knew what he was doing. And I truly believe that. And because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a relationship today with his mom. And on Christmas Eve, I got a text message from her with a picture of him. He's 16 and he's on varsity baseball. And he's looking to graduate early, and he has plans for a future. And if I selfishly would have brought that little boy back into my life where I could have provided for him, I could have stole a car seat, I could have stole the milk, I brought him into my trouble, he wouldn't have the life that he has today. He wouldn't have the two parents that he has today. And that was all part of God's plan, not mine. But because I'm sober and because I work a program today, I get to have that relationship with his mother and share the highlights of his life through her. And that's enough for me today. And that's how God works in my life. I don't have to run from that. That pain that I came in with before getting sober, my steps taught me how to get through all of that guilt, all of that shame, and to be able to just be content and happy today with the way life has gone. So in Midland, you know, here I am. Things are kind of slowly happening again. And I'm not seeing that, you know, that there's a malady inside of me, just like the book talks about. I'm spiritually dead, but I'm searching. I'm searching for, you know, a job. I'm searching for a house. I'm searching for all these things to make that inside right. But I don't know anything about it. Let me back up a little bit. In 2008, when I came home from prison, my dad picked me up. And I thought he was taking me to lunch, but he took me to a meeting. And I remember right before getting out of the car, he hands me a big book. And I remember looking at him so disgusted and just offended and was like, I ain't nothing like you. But I took the book and I never opened the book. And the book, and I'm the queen of losing everything. But that book came from Fort Worth to Midland with me. And when I ended up in treatment, I remember that blue book. And I asked my sponsor, can I write him a letter? And she says, you can write him a letter, but you cannot make any amends to him. And I followed the directions of my sponsor. And I told him that I was in treatment and that I remember that blue book he gave me. And I put my phone number in there. And 3 days later, I got a text message that said, welcome home, kid. And ever since then, I've been in my dad's life for the past 7 years, and it's been like eternity for both of us. But you see, that seed was being planted there, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. But the day that I became ready, it all came back around in a full circle, and it made sense. And that's the gift of this program. That's the spirit of AA. That's the language of the heart that we get to share in these rooms. And so back in Midland, I'm getting worse, and I end up getting pregnant. My husband and I were trying to build a life. I'm a stay-at-home mom for the first time ever, and all I'm doing is just drinking and getting worse by the day while he's going to work trying to provide for us. And I end up having my third child. So I have 4 kids right now. My oldest is 21 and my youngest is 8. And they all live at home still. I have my 2 oldest adult children. One's in college and one just graduated. And then I have my younger ones that are 8 and 9. But I get pregnant after making the decision to get Isaac up. Later on, about a year or 2 years later, I get pregnant. And that's not enough to keep me sober, and I'm just getting worse. And it's just progressing. And then before you know it, here comes Addie. I get pregnant a year later after her. And I'm getting worse. And my husband doesn't know what to do with me. And I don't even know what to do anymore. And every time I take a drink, I get crazy. I get bitter. Alcohol just stopped working. And I remember getting to those places in my mind where, I didn't want to live, but at the same time, I didn't have the courage to take my own life. So I would often look at my husband and think about taking his. But I didn't do that either. Thank God I'm still here. Where I come from, treatment's not an option. You're considered weak. You go to jail, you dry out, you come home, you do you get yourself together. That's where I come from. That was culture for us. But that wasn't my experience. Institutions never worked. Jails never worked for me. But in 2015, I was spiritually dead. There was an emptiness in me that I had never identified before. And I had my kids in my life, and I had stability, but nobody was home on the inside. And it didn't work anymore. And so I remember finding the Springboard Center in Midland. And, my husband didn't believe me. He was just like, oh, she's just going to, she's going to pull one of her stunts again. And it's just going to be the same thing with her. But it worked. I checked into treatment June 30th of 2015. And I wasn't a very good client. I fought a girl in detox. I did donuts in the parking lot. I got drunk in their bathroom. Cussed out my counselor. And I'm not encouraging you, any women back there, don't do as I did. Because I went in there, I was so institutionalized. I went in there calling, the dining room chow hall. And when the nurse would come, I'd be like, there's pill line. And they would have to redirect me, and I would refer to everything outside as the world, and they would look at me, these people, there was maybe about one of them that had done time, or I was probably the worst off one in there. And they would be like, Cece, why do you call it the world? I was like, because it's the world, and they just didn't, they would just look at me like, okay, this is the world too. And I try to leave every day. And when I went to treatment, guys, my baby was 9 months old. She was still on formula. My oldest daughter was 14. My son, I didn't tell you that I have a son that's deaf. And when I was pregnant with him, I was on the run and I didn't receive any prenatal care and I was using. I stand behind this podium telling you that I was that mom. I was that mom. I birthed 5 children and only one I'm never used with. My last child, Addie, that one was bad. I didn't want her. I didn't want my husband. And selfishly, I wanted the pregnancy to go away. And I used, meth and alcohol till about 4 months pregnant until I realized that it's not changing. Come to reality, And so I was, I had all that stuff going on in my life like that. And my son, who's deaf, I could never accept him being deaf. And I could never show up and give him the medical care that he needed. And by the grace of God, being sober, and being an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been able to be in his life. We were able to send him to the Texas School of Deaf to the Texas School for the Deaf. He graduated this past June, and I became a grandma last month with him. And he's not, the relationship that he shares with the mother of his child is not in good standing. But I get to be the one that has a sane mind today, that doesn't have to react and doesn't have to blame and doesn't have to run away from, this is how his life has turned out. That's what a program does for you. So, in treatment, the first couple of weeks, it was hard. It didn't, I couldn't get it. But then that light turned on. And like the way Kenny said, we would be in groups, and the staff, they would share their story of where they'd been and what it was like. And the Springboard Center is very 12-step based. It is big book based. And I started to find myself in this book. And I really related to the physical allergy, the doctor's opinion, because that's what was happening for me. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. And I didn't understand what that was. What is that? I needed that drink just to make me feel like I could breathe. But the truth is when I put that drink into my body, I lost control. I would drive with my kids in the car drunk. I would go commit crimes with them in the car drunk. I would end up at dope houses. I would forget that I was married. I would forget that I was a mother. I would forget that I was a convicted felon. And if I pick up one more charge, I'm going to get a habitual, because that's what type of background of felonies that I have made a mess of my life. And the step one says we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol. What does that mean? That means that when I put alcohol in any form into my body, I cannot control it. It controls me. And those examples that I just gave from my experience is what happens. And then it hyphenates that our lives became unmanageable. My life was a disaster. I am the type of alcoholic that will burn my life to the ground. That's what happens. And until I could accept that first step, until I could look in this book and identify my alcoholism, I could not take that first step. And in this doctor's opinion, it just clicked. It clicked. That's what's happening. That is what's happening to me, and then it talked about that restless, irritable, and discontent. I kept searching for that. And I would see people in my life that could take a drink, like my husband. Man, that man and I, we've committed crimes together. We've done a lot of things together, but he does not have the physical allergy. The book talks about 3 different types of drinkers: the moderate, the hard, and the alcoholic. Right? I'm the real alcoholic. That's what happens to me. With him, he can have this drink, fall asleep on the couch, and then go to bed and go to work the next day. I have this drink, party's on, where are we headed to? And I won't see you for about another week or so. And sometimes for me, it's years later. That's what my life looks like. And I've cut all these people out of my life, and I forgot about all these things that just meant the best, that means the world to me. But I am incapable of following through anytime it comes. I didn't have a problem with God. I was raised with very loving grandmothers. My grandmothers raised me, and they always taught me about God, and they always taught me to pray for my mother, because my mother has been in and out of prison my entire life. Pray for your mom, and there was a good experience with God. But I also came from the Hispanic family of, we do the sign of the cross, we do a drug deal, and God, please don't let us get caught. So I needed a new relationship with God. My relationship with God was not a healthy one. And step two, that's what it was for me. In treatment, I got a sponsor. And that sponsor got me to where she needed to get me to. And then I got another sponsor. And that didn't work out that great with that sponsor. And then I had a lady come into my life, Miss Maria. And Miss Maria was all big book. and she never veered me from the first 164 pages. And I'm grateful for that lady, because she took the time to take me through the book and help me understand it. And she taught me about the mental twist. She taught me about the obsession of the mind. She would help me see these things, because you can't. It talks about in here that a self-appraisal is insufficient, which means that a sick mind cannot heal a sick mind. I can't sponsor myself, and I can't take myself through the book. I gotta have another woman, not man, ladies, another woman to help me heal. If I'm gonna heal, I gotta heal with a woman. And that's what she did. And she took me through it, and she took the time, and she would look at me and she would tell me things like, Cecilia, you're really delusional. And I would look at her and be like, you are. Until one day it clicked. I was very, very delusional. Very delusional. But what helped me see my delusion was doing the work. You know when the guy, was it Adam? Tommy? Adam. When Adam was reading the preamble, he talked about rarely have we seen a person fail that has thoroughly followed our path. In that paragraph alone, it talks about honesty 3 times. And I was real good about telling people what they wanted to hear. But I didn't know nothing about spiritual principles. And how it works says, how does it work? It works just fine. How does it work? It works with honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I had to get honest with me, because I could come in the rooms and tell you what you wanted to hear. I could sit in front of my counselor and tell her what she wanted to hear. I could go out and on the ground where everybody was doing what they did and told them what they wanted to hear. But until I got honest with Cecilia, that is where the change was going to happen. And that's how it starts. And so I started to go through the work, and I worked with this sponsor for a long time. She was my sponsor for about a good 4 years until she moved to Austin. And then I got another sponsor. And, she was my sponsor probably about 3 years or so. And, that's what it's all about. I've never been the type to sponsor jump, because there's a lot about me that I need a sponsor to help to get to know and to build that relationship. I didn't know how to have relationships with people. And for step 2, when I came to believe in a power greater than myself, my sponsor, I went through the book and I looked for everywhere that I saw God in. And that's what helped me find that relationship. And in step 3, when I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him, well, this is where I'm starting to connect with God and make a commitment to God for all the things that he has done for me. And I had to go through the first 164 pages and pull stuff out and write a contract with God. You see, because pride and ego returns. And just like I said in the beginning, this disease is resting. The problem is in the center is in the mind, not of the body. And it's resting. And so as time goes on, we get a little bit of time. That ego returns. I forget what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. I forget that newcomer, just like it says right there, I'm responsible. I am responsible to help another newcomer. I forget. Alcoholism, I once heard a speaker say, alcoholism will help me remember everything I'm supposed to forget and forget everything I'm supposed to remember. It's the great forgetter. And it happens in recovery. And so when I would get too busy, when I would say no, I'm telling you, before I came here, my husband was supposed to drive me out. We got family members that are not well in our house right now, and he ends up getting the bug. And so my sponsees, everybody's out of town or they're working. And so anyways, I have a good friend in the program. He's my coworker as well, and he's my brother in sobriety. And I called him and he says, come pick me up. And that's what we do. That's what we do for each other, is we support each other and we're there for each other, but the truth is I made a commitment to be here. Just because David's sick doesn't mean I'm sick. And the way I was taught is if you say something in AA, you do it. Unless you're in a hospital bed. And I wasn't the one in the hospital bed, so I had to get my butt to San Angelo. And those are the type of things that we get to do today in these rooms, is we get to practice integrity. We get to be still with our spirit. We get to look at ourselves in the mirror and not hate who we see. Man, this past year has been a rough year. Hasn't been an easy one. But working a program and working with others and staying close to and making meetings and doing the things, that God continues to show me to do has brought me to the other side of them. And not once have I thought about a drink, and not once have I thought about a drug. Because today my God lives within me. And 10, 11, and 12 helped me to stay connected to God. When I got to step 4 is when I looked at all that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it helped me look at the truth about myself. It also helped me look at the stuff that didn't belong to me. One thing I learned is that when I came into recovery, here was me. Here was all that stuff that was blocking me from the sunlight of the Spirit, my resentments, my fears, my guilt, my shame, the lies, the years of just accumulating. And then here was that God of my understanding. For many years, I would try to get to him, but I've always been blocked and never understood why when I would try to get to God, I would just abandon him one more time because I wasn't connected. Step 4 helped me to look at that stuff and then sit down with a sponsor. I sat down when I did my first inventory, when I did my first step 5, it took 4.5 hours. That was a sick one. In the Al-Anon room at 710. And I didn't come out relieved and dancing on clouds. And I felt like I just got out of a cat fight. And then that woman told me, you left your husband out. And I was like, what? But I was willing to do what they told me to do. And that's where it comes from. If you're here, you're not here because your life is going right. You're here because, God has brought you here maybe to see, to see if you can hear, man, that story sounds like mine. Or, man, I've been where that woman's been. Or I connect to that passage in the book. It's not my job to tell you that you're an alcoholic. Just like it was nobody else's job to tell me that I was an alcoholic. But when I came in here, I sat down and I listened. I found the facts about my alcoholism in this book, and I guard myself with them today. And sobriety for me is complete abstinence. I don't stand behind this podium and say I'm sober, but still use other things. It doesn't work for me. I have to completely stay away from all forms of alcohol in order to live the life that I live today and to stay connected. And life's pretty good. My oldest daughter is 21. My son is 19. My little girls are 8 and 9. I've got to take 2 kids across the stage. I'm blessed that they all live at home on some days. I share a relationship with my husband today. He doesn't always, I don't always like him, but my program helps me to tolerate and love him. Life is okay today. Life is okay. And I did go through all those steps. I know we're down to so much time and I could go on. And I mean, the way I went through the steps was very thoroughly. But today I get to see steps 6 and 7 in my life. And you know what? They don't all go away. There's no magic wand that just because you identify with these character defects, it is like, I wish it was that easy. My experience has been God puts it right here and says, what are you going to do with it? So if I have a defect of anger and that little, I'm still faced with it. That's a lesson in my life that God is he's trying to take it from me. Let me talk a little bit about that 3rd step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, the victory over them of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. I remember that I was introduced to that prayer and something started to change. I didn't understand a lot of it. The book was very foreign. Don't get this, for my ladies back there. The book was foreign and the language wasn't my language. And when I came in, women weren't my thing. Right? It's like, I can't trust her. But the women have saved my life. They have saved my life. And I get chills saying today that I vow wholeheartedly, not to say that I don't love you, brothers, I love y'all, but I vow wholeheartedly to give the same love to a woman today that was given to me. And I go back to that third step prayer because when it says to build with me and to do with me, what that means is that God is going to chisel all of those things out of me in order to build me in his image of who I was meant to be. All those years of running and gunning and thugging and thinking that I was, this person and that person. And believe me, whatever boyfriend I was with, and if he was into metal or if he was thugging or he was this or he was a rocker, I was doing it with him. But none of those people were ever me. It was who I was searching to be. And what the program has taught me, what the steps have done for me, is allowed me to find my true self, who God created me to be, the mother that he created me to be, the woman that he created me to be, the sister, the friend, the neighbor, the coworker, all the things that I get to do today. Before coming in these rooms, I was unemployable. I got sober at the Springboard Center, and a year later, I went back to work for them. I gave them 5.5 years. Well, let me say they gave me 5.5 years. And I loved every day of working in residential treatment. A year ago, I took a position at Thriving United in Midland, which is a recovery organization treatment center. I'm not a treatment center, just a recovery center. And I was promoted to manager. And I've been in the field for 6 years, 6.5 years, the recovery field. And you see, those things couldn't happen if I wasn't sober. I wouldn't be able to hold jobs today. I get to pick up my kids from school today, drop them off and pick them up and not forget about them. I get to show up for their events in life and not have to be, drunk. And the biggest one is I didn't have to be drunk Santa this year. I was like, that's the cool thing today, right? These are the type of things that happen when you suit up and show up. And it's not an overnight process. I didn't get sick overnight, therefore I don't get well overnight. And I got to keep coming back because God keeps showing me more. He keeps showing me more that needs to be worked on. And I always say it was about 20-something years of drinking and drugging versus the amount of time that I'm blessed with right now. There's still so much more to be uncovered, discovered, and disregarded. And that's only through doing the work of the book. And doing things like, when I'm asked to do for AA, to carry the message. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. And if you're new, get a sponsor and keep coming back as we do recover.